From my understanding, it was vague, and also because at the time it was not characterized as a war. So, a lot of people went in initially like, even gung ho, like, this is to stop the dominoes of,
Communism.
communism, following the French. And I think what I gathered from my dad was that the impact of JFK and, service to your country, um, it had a big impact. So there was a deal of, patriotism involved.
Absolutely.
Um, but of course, nobody wants to go to war. Nobody wants to be stationed out there. And um, I think my dad, his approach was, because it was early on, um, he could already see the writing on the wall. Like this was going to turn into something. It was kept every year. More and more American soldiers were dying and getting, further in there. This is after the Cuban Missile Crisis, so the tensions already, the Cold War kind of tension is ratcheting up. Um, I think he made the strategic. This is a story he told us. He made this strategic choice after initially getting drafted, to volunteer for assignment in Vietnam, because at first he was drafted and he was in bases in Hawaii and Guam as they're starting, bringing in. Incidentally, they were bringing in the dioxin chemicals later known as Agent Orange. So they were starting already to stockpile those, tens of thousands of tons every year, bringing those in. So you could kind of see and you could feel the tension. But he volunteered for assignment in Vietnam because he made the calculation: if he waited to be assigned or get drafted,
He'd be in a war.
as happened with a lot of black soldiers and other soldiers, you'd be put into a combat frontline position. So he wanted to volunteer so he could use the education that he had and do more like, logistics, operations, and things like that. So as far as what they're fighting for, yeah, I don't think it was
Clear.
yeah, I mean, you kind of, everybody would, you have the propaganda, you're fighting to stop the commies, and, we're gonna, take over the world
Yeah,
and
we
something
have
like
to
that.
stop it. We have to nip it in the bud, somebody said.
Yeah. Yeah. So, because he was there, I think 61 to 64. So at that time he was based in Saigon, and he was help. They were ramping up. So he was part of the operation of, the bring, like I said, bring in and this is from what I understand, the helicopters, the different um, bases that they're expanding, the chemical weapons that they were talking.
It was like a real ramp up. It was like really starting. And he was
Yeah,
right.
yeah. So it was at that time. Um, I think the South Vietnamese. So one of the major, a couple stories that really stick out in my mind, that he experienced at that time was the self-immolation of the
Yeah.
Buddhist monk. This was about 1962, I believe. And so that was a monumental event, because I think that was so profound for Americans back home and for John F. Kennedy. And like, this was kind of a threshold moment. And I think it led to the overthrow of the South Vietnamese government at that time.
Yeah.
And so that really started kicking things off as far as the tensions and the fighting. But I know he felt like in Saigon it was already like being in a war zone, because there was so much tension, and there was multiple enemies. I mean, it could, you didn't know if it was
Friend or
North
foe.
Vietnamese or the South Vietnamese fighting the Buddhists rebels, or what was going on there.
Really confusing what was going on.
Yeah, so he almost, I think he said something like, it was like a 360 degree, being in a 360 degree war. You're not exactly sure what is going on. What he did indicate was a huge turning point for him and for a lot of other black veterans. I mean, like, so one thing I should back up is like his family, my uncles, his brother, they fought in Korea War, so there's big,
History.
tradition of serving in the army as a way of actually getting ahead and getting professional skills and stuff like that. So it wasn't, my dad was really interested to get into even considering the Peace Corps or do kind of like, international work, more in terms of helping people, not killing people. But the
Right.
army was definitely, it was seen as a positive professional development um, avenue. But I think a big turning point for him and a lot of Black veterans was, I think, even before 1968, but when Martin Luther King came out against Vietnam War, those kind of things. And I don't know about the, Muhammad Ali stuff. I don't know if that came later, but I think a lot of Black veterans started getting politicized once they got to Vietnam and started hearing some of the stuff that was happening back home.